Hello everyone, welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben. I have another video for you today. This is a podcast that I did recently with Brien Foerster as well as Jimmy from the excellent Bright Insight channel. Jimmy and I had recently traveled to Egypt last year. This was the first chance I had to catch up with him, and I've also been meaning to speak with Brien for probably more than a year now. I've spoken with him before, I've also traveled with him before. And he's an excellent guest. He's very knowledgeable. So I was very much looking forward to the chance to sit down and talk with both of these guys. Some of you may have seen this video. It's also on Brian's channel as well as Jimmy's channel. I've spent the last few days editing mine up. I've added a lot of footage into this. I've kind of given it a lot of background imagery that backs up and sort of shows some of the sites that we're talking about. And I also wanted to use this video to let you all know that I will be joining Brien on his tour of Peru and Bolivia that is happening in August of this year, of 2021. Jimmy will also be there, so this is going to be kind of a follow-up to our Egypt tour. It's kind of a last-minute opportunity. I'm joining Brien's tour as it is. If you'd like to join me, you can do so. There are still some spots open on this tour. You can find the details of this tour on Brian's site. It's hiddenincatours.com. There'll be a link to it below in the description. This is the tour, the Megaliths and Ancient Spirituality tour of Peru and Bolivia. Again, runs from August 9th to 18th. I will also be there for the pre-tour, which is I think starts on the 6th of August. That involves the Nazca Lines and Paracas. It's a great itinerary on the tour. I'm very much in support of this, very much looking forward to it, and I hope to see a few of you there as well. So, in any case, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Cheers. All right, well, welcome back to the podcast. I'm really pleased to say that I'm joined today by a couple of my favorite people, and this has been a long time in the coming. We've got Brien Foerster from Hidden Inca Tours. Brien, how are you?
Lovely. How about you?
Good, mate. Yeah, good. Well, I know we've been threatening to chat for quite some time, and we're also joined today by Jimmy from the Bright Insight channel, a good friend of mine, and somebody that I've just we had shared a trip to Egypt. Yeah, Jimmy, good to see you, mate. How's it going?
Great to see you guys. Yeah, we had a blast in Egypt. There's so many things to chat about with that, and this is my first time chatting with Brien Foerster directly, which is awesome. I couldn't be more excited. I've said it a million times. You're the guy. I was researching these ancient topics back in 2015, and I came across a video of you at the Serapeum with the 100-ton boxes, and now here we are, 5-6 years later.
Yes. Wow, pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to get all you guys together, and like I said, I've also been talking with Brian's one of the people that got me originally interested in all of this as well. In fact, I first met him on tour in 2013 with Graham Hancock. That was one of the first exposures I had to all of these things, and ever since then I've kind of been pestering Brien on and off probably for the last 7 or 8 years. We did some interviews with him on an older YouTube channel, and I'd been down to Peru and said hello a couple of times since then. So yeah, I'm great. I'm glad we're getting the chance to chat about all this stuff. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So I would probably start with something that is fresh in mind, and that is that Jimmy and I had just come back. This is the first time also, Jimmy, that we're getting to chat about the Egypt trip. So we had what was a really intense but also very fun, I think, trip to Egypt in late November, early December of last year, which was kind of a crazy time to try and do it, but we kind of managed to pull it off. It was a good couple of weeks.
It was amazing. It was epic, and it's surreal to think that was just a little over a month ago that we were there. It seems like, it seems real recent, far more recent than 6 weeks ago. But yeah, that being my first time there and doing it with you. And like you said, it was an intense trip. We were busy. It was because we went to 24 sites in 2 weeks, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, it was
whatever it was.
The packed schedule.
And packed. And it was a bit tiresome, but that's not a complaint because I've already forgotten about that part, because it's like everything I saw exceeded my expectations. Everything's bigger when you see it in person. And we'll get into those details in a second, but I just want to say that traveling with you was awesome. You're a great travel buddy, and you'd already been to these sites, that was your 5th time, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and you were just showing and pointing so many things out to me that I had never even heard of. There were so many details on that Giza Plateau that I was like, I didn't know that was there. Like, like these piping systems and those massive blocks at the top of the causeway, shit that just, me that's been looking into specific things like the Sphinx and the pyramid and the blocks and the technology, and there's all these other nuanced details there that are worthy of discussion. And anyway, it was a pleasure to travel with you, and we're going to do it again. We got to travel together again someplace.
We are, in fact. Yes. Yeah. That's, in fact, we've just before we started recording this, we've kind of been plotting on some ideas, because it's one thing that I've always also enjoyed South America and Peru, and obviously Brien lives down in Peru, and so we were just talking about that. So if anyone's interested, and I know lots of people on probably all of our channels we are talking and thinking about putting together a trip with all three of us down to South America and Peru, probably even this year. So stay tuned. The next couple of weeks, hopefully, we'll get those details worked out, and we'll announce something. And if people want a chance to join us down in South America and Peru, I think that will be coming up in the near future.
We got to make it happen. We got to do it. Right, Brien? What are you thinking?
Well, it'll be a pleasure to explore these places with you two, and with other people of like mind from around the world. Because I've been doing this for about 13 years, so we have a system down that's very efficient in terms of moving people around and making sure everyone's happy and blowing their minds with the incredible megalithic stuff that's in Peru and Bolivia.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a wonderful experience.
Yes, it should be.
Yeah.
In fact, Brien, you really, it's a place that I've only been to once, and it was on that trip with you in 2013. That's I think indicative of the kind of experience you can get with traveling with you and with people that really know. Like I consider you to be an expert, obviously an expert down there. And you've been, as you say, you live down there. You've been doing this for a long time. But Napa Huaca is one of my favorite or Napa Iglesias is the other name that people use for it. Wonderful little, like crazy megalithic site that's not on any of the normal tourist itineraries. It's not something that many people get to go and see. It's kind of a little journey. You got to walk up past a river, up some train tracks, and then hike up the side of a terraced hillside in the Sacred Valley to find this little megalithic cave that's up there, made out of bluestone or granite. And it's got these incredible shapes in the granite. It's not something that's an official site or anything, but yeah, that was. I assume there's all these little things like that all over South America that are just not part of the regular well-known parts of it, but that are mind-blowing nonetheless. It's stuff like that it just, to me, is just like there's something else that was going on down here. This wasn't all just Inca work.
Oh yeah. That's a special little place, Napa Huaca. If you look it up on the internet, most commonly it's listed as Ñaupa Iglesia, but that's a mix of an Inca word with a Spanish word. And so I consulted with my friend Wilco, and we decided to rename it Ñaupa Huaca, which means the ancient sacred place, giving it a proper Inca name rather than a mix like that. But yeah, there's still a number of places up around Cusco in the Sacred Valley that I haven't been to yet. Nothing big. I've been all the big ones. Mm-hmm. But my friend Wilco, my other friend and mentor Teo, they've lived in Cusco all their lives, so they know these subtle little locations that they want to take me to in the near future.
Awesome.
Still a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Jimmy, I don't know if you've seen it. We have had a video on it, but I think that's definitely a place that if we all got together and went down there, that we'd go and visit. It's a real special little corner of Peru.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jimmy, one thing I wanted to ask you is, and I hadn't had the chance to do this yet because, as I said, this is kind of the first time we've really talked much since the trip. But that was your first trip to Egypt, right? That was on the tour.
Yeah.
And as you said, like it was when you're there, it's tiring and it's usually a busy schedule, but it's not the part that you take away from it. I guess my question is, what were your impressions of it? And did you, like a lot of people seem to feel that when you just visit Egypt, but often it almost immediately calls you back. Like a lot of people I've talked to that visit it for the first time, like, man, it was just, it was mind-blowing and such that, you almost immediately want to go back and go and look at a lot of this stuff again after you've had a chance to process it. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, there was a special vibe to it. I've been to different places in the world. I'm not like a vast world traveler though, but there's different places where you feel better at than others. And there was something about Egypt that has such a good vibe. The people were wonderful. I mean, I'm talking the most friendly and welcoming people ever. And it was something about, and people can think what they want, but I'm like, there's there was a vibe about it. I'm like, I could almost live here if it wasn't so crowded, because I like a little bit quieter. And maybe the pollution is a little bit much for me, but like minus those little things, I could see myself living there for a few months. It was something about it that was special. And I felt sad leaving. I mean, I was there for 17 nights because I got there 2 nights before the tour started.
Yeah.
And when I was leaving, I felt sad. I mean, it's always that feeling of it feels good to go home, get in your own bed, and you're back into your routine. But there was something about it. I'm like, I already knew. I'm like, well, I'm definitely coming back for a variety of reasons too. It was when you see everything for the first time, and some places you're a little bit more rushed than others. You know, some places you have plenty of time there and you really have time to take it in. But still, when you're seeing multiple places a day and you're doing it every single day, you know, some things become a little bit blurry. And I'm like, you know, I'm kind of like, I mean, you probably saw me. I was like a kid in a candy store. I'm like looking around. I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, where do I take pictures?
Yeah.
Which I think I'm at by about 23,000 photos I took like 8,000 photos on my cell phone because I wanted some. And then I'm at like 15 something thousand on my mirrorless. And I'm like, I still haven't gone through all of them.
No.
But yeah, to answer your question, it exceeded my expectations. I can't wait to go back. And I just had the time of my life there. I remember telling you that when I was leaving to go to the airport. You're on your balcony at the hotel. I'm walking out. I'm like, Ben, thank you. I had the time of my life.
Oh,
and
yeah,
the thing is, I've been telling people, I'm like, more people need to go there. Like, don't bother. Don't look, Rome in ancient Greece. I'm sure that's all wonderful. I haven't been either. But I'm like, I don't know. Compared to Egypt, that stuff is like child's play. And I say that with respect. But the stuff that the Egyptians did is next level. Everything's huge. And it's very affordable. I mean, what is it? $1 US goes 15 Egyptian pound.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could go live there like a king. And you can make, if you want to, there's different ways of traveling. You go on a tour. If you want to do things on your own, there's different, you know, cost benefits going either way. But
sure.
Yeah, I just would encourage more people to do it. And I just can't say enough about it. And when people ask me, like, because I have friends and family, you know, coming home, like, so what do you think about it? And like the first thing that I say, I'm like, Egypt's wild. It's wild.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys are going back, right? Has that all been finalized and announced? Is that all happening?
Yeah.
This is good news. You announced it, Brien. I haven't announced anything on my channel or anything like that. I was waiting to get all the details, and this has just been finalized in the last few days. So, what's happening?
Yeah, well, all we're waiting for is for the poster. But yeah, we're going to be going. This will be my 9th trip to Egypt. So our tour with Jimmy is going to be October 1st to 14th of this year. And I think it'll be a great time to go. The weather will still be nice. It won't be too hot. People's other concerns they don't have to worry about. I've heard almost nobody's wearing a mask in Egypt anymore because it's just, you know, the possibility of catching anything bad is basically zero.
Right.
Of course, we'll be doing it with Patricia Awian, who I've been working with for about a decade. And she's with a great company called Select Egypt Travel, who are very professional.
They're great.
There'll be a Nile cruise. There'll be all sorts of stuff that Jimmy has seen, but I don't think you've been to Tanis, have you?
No, we didn't make it out there.
Yeah.
Just with the nature of the tour. I mean, we basically took a group vote and we decided to skip it because it was going to be like a 6-hour drive or whatever.
It's a long drive.
It was a 3.5 hour each way.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, so we'll be going there, which I can't wait to see because that place is incredible. And also going down into the Sphinx's paws because we didn't get to do that. We were up in above the enclosure. And so going down there by the paws is going to be, I want to be down there. I need to look.
Yeah.
I need to take a peek.
Inside the Sphinx enclosure is a good experience. I've been down in there too. That's worth doing. Yeah, we had planned to go to Tanis, it was kind of like a flow-on effect of what happened. Just the part and parcel of the risks of traveling in 2020, late 2020, was that we had originally planned a Nile cruise on ours, and literally 2 days before we flew to Luxor, we got the call from. We also use Select Egypt. And they tried to move. The government pulled all the permits for all the cruise ships. So we had a ship booked. We had it all ready to go. But then, literally 2 days as we were on the tour, it was like, oh man, this has just happened. They're not going to let them sail. No cruise ships were sailing, from what we could tell. And Yeah, so we had to pivot and say, all right, we do Upper Egypt by bus, which you just, it ultimately sort of compounded. There was quite a bit of bus travel, and then and towards the end of the trip, it's like, well, we've got a day where Tanis and Bastet's like a big day. Get up early. It is a long bus drive from Cairo. So we decided the group decided we'd rather spend another day at Giza. And at the Giza, you could spend a week just at the Giza Plateau, just walking around. I mean, easily.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we pivoted. I'm glad you guys are getting to Tanis though. It's absolutely worth the trip, and it's worth the time it takes to get out there. It's a wonderful spot. I did a couple of videos on it. It's some place I do want to get back to as well. But yeah, Tanis is awesome.
No, I found it completely it's probably the most bizarre sight in all of Egypt to me, because before that I'd only seen like 4 really bad photographs that had been taken of some busted statues. But when you get there, it's like a lunar landscape. No plants grow at Tanis because it looks like it was hit by some kind of incredible heat force and just blew the whole place to pieces. There's 12 or 13 massive obelisks that have all been snapped like styrofoam. Mm-hmm. Everything was found buried underground. So it's very, very mysterious. It's in the middle of a military compound, which is kind of weird. But the first time I went to Tanis, I was completely blown away by it.
Yeah.
Me having not been there, it looks like, honestly, just from seeing pictures and video that you've posted, I'm like, it looks like evidence of a cataclysm. Something terrible happened there. It's pretty apparent.
Yeah.
I mean, why else is it all buried under, and knocked over and everything's broken and there were massive structures, statues and columns. And
yeah, it's one of the most... Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Well, one of the, there are a lot of incredible mysteries at Tanis too, because you see bits and pieces of broken this, broken that. You see obvious heat scorching on quartzite pieces, and then there's a foot that's about 7 feet long, and I think it was Petrie or one of the other archaeologists who did the initial analysis, and he said that originally, he found it was either 1 or 2 statues that were broken, and based on the size of the foot, he estimated this statue or these 2 statues were more than 100 feet tall, made of 1 piece of stone.
Granite.
And so when you go to Tanis and you want to go and walk to the area where all these bits and pieces are, the military just tells you to come back. It's an area they will not let you explore, out of bounds. But that is Egypt. The key about Egypt is to find somebody who's got a key to open a door to let you in.
Key called bakshish in a lot of cases. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
You got to. There's definitely a way that country works. But I did a video about that statue in particular. And yeah, it was Petrie, and it was what was probably and possibly the largest stone statue ever made. It was, as you said, over, like, if people have seen the Colossi of Memnon, this thing was another third taller than those, and they're far bigger than the statues, the giant big single piece statues at Luxor, and like you said, all that's left of it. There's a couple pieces he found of it. There's this 1 foot, and and you kind of have this big toe, and they've got this amazing picture. I think it was Muhammad Ibrahim. Your whole hand just fits inside the toenail, like, so in terms of scale, more or less a similar size to the Statue of Liberty. Just the structure of the statue itself, but made from 1 single piece of granite, and just incredible. And that's one of the things at Tanis. You likely had several of them, as well as like avenues of sphinxes and columns and obelisks and all giant megalithic single pieces. It's, as you said, like this. It would have rivaled. I mean, this was a place that was like Karnak, and in scope and scale, probably even, if not even bigger. I mean, there's just nothing much left of it anymore. In fact, I saw something so incredible at Karnak as well, and I think there was similar statues of a similar scale. I saw something at Karnak, which was made from conglomerate, which includes flint, which is even harder than granite. What's left of a hand, and there's a thumb on that, and that thumb was almost the same size as this big toe. So if you just sort of work on extrapolating the size and scale of it, you're talking about other statues of that same magnitude also at Karnak, and this you're talking like 1,200 tons, 1,500 tons, certainly even more than that with the one piece of stone, and the fact that it's conglomerate stone is even crazier because that's, I mean, it gets into the details of how to work stone, but conglomerate is in some ways a much harder material to work than just granite because you have this varying degree of hardness of the material that's in it. It can vary wildly, like from soft to hard. So getting those machine surfaces and those flat edges, which I think are these, signatures of advanced technology and signatures of techniques that we can't explain by the tools and techniques that we have in the archaeological record or of what we know of the dynastic Egyptians, makes me, obviously I think they were inherited, but it's, I think that stuff was everywhere. Like the best example we have of something of that scale now is the Ramesseum. There's that fallen over big statue. And even that's slightly smaller than these other statues that we're talking about. And that's just, when you first, I had this trip in December was the first time I'd managed to get to the Ramesseum. I'd not been there before.
Oh, really?
And luckily I was on the balloon. We did the balloon ride over the West Bank, so we flew over it, I think the day before or that morning. And then we got to the Ramesseum. It was just perfect. It was close to sunset. The light was incredible. The footage I have from the Ramesseum and the images is just astonishing. And man, I tell you what, it hits home when you see the scope and the scale, the sheer size of what that statue would have been like. And again, one single piece of granite, unbelievable.
Yeah. It's 1,000 tons.
Yeah, at least. Yeah,
it's unreal. Besides you're mentioning like being there at sunset, the lighting was fantastic. It was a beautiful sunny day. But I remember thinking, like, going up, and you're describing before, like, with the that massive foot, and it's like similar right there. I mean, I remember taking a photo of it. I'm like, this is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was based on a true story. It's right here, because like in the first one, Fellowship, and they're like going on the canoes down the river, and they're passing by those massive statues that are like this, and I'm like, that's what it reminds me of. I'm like, just standing next to the shoulder, and you see pictures of it, and you see people standing in front of it, and you're like, that's huge. But then when you see something with your own eyes and you're right there, it's even bigger. I mean, I think most people can comprehend that things look bigger in person, but we do try to imagine in our minds what it will look like just based on those other photos you see with some dude standing in front of it. But when you're actually there and you take it all in, I knew I was in the presence of greatness. I'm like, what happened here? I'm like, this place, the precision of that. And by the way, how far did that stone come from that particular location? I don't know if it was 100 miles or it was miles. It was something.
Yeah,
it wasn't right there.
That's right. Yeah, there's Aswan, the quarry is still a significant way, even in Upper Egypt. But again, you've got examples of those sort of scale of stone as far north as Tanis. And Tanis is the other direction from Cairo.
That's it's 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah, that's in the delta.
From Aswan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
and there's no Nile River there to
that's right,
to shuttle this stuff down.
Brien.
It's like
Brien, tree trunks and olive oil. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well, milk's the other thing. Like they put milk in front of the sleds. Yeah, it's funny, that's a good point, because that's what we're referring to, of course, is the orthodox explanation for a lot of this stuff, which is, well, it's Saqqara. We've got a scene on the wall where they've loaded an obelisk on a boat, and they obviously were floating these things down the Nile, and that's how, because the Aswan quarry's about 1 kilometer from the Nile. It's not that close. Even with the inundation, the Nile wouldn't have been that close. And then that's the coverall explanation that gets used to say, well, this is how they shipped these huge pieces of stone. Now, there's a few problems with this. Yeah. It's something I'm working on in a video at the moment, but the scene on the wall in Saqqara, real famous, on the causeway. I've got plenty of pictures of it. We saw it, Jimmy. The obelisks are tiny. They're like the guys standing next to it. It comes up to about his chest height. Like, they're much smaller obelisks. They're maybe 70, 80 ton maximum, which is, sure, that's plausible. You can... Right. I think where the difference starts to show is when you scale up to 600 plus tons, which you have a lot of objects in that category in Egypt. So I'm sure they were shipping smaller stuff on the Nile. But the other thing is you have a lot of objects and a lot of granite that didn't come from Aswan. Like Aswan's rose granite. There's a lot of the pink granite. That's where it came from. But you have like the Wadi Hammamet quarry, which is in the eastern desert. There's a number of other quarries.
Sinai.
Yeah, Sinai.
Right, and it's
the mountains.
It's mountains. You have mountains, valleys, desert. I know rivers, and again, you're talking about moving blocks of stone significant distances. In some cases, these are 600, even larger blocks of stone.
Yeah.
And whether you think they worked on them on site or they were finished first, assuming it was a rough block of stone, add another 300 or 400 tons because they had to shape it yet.
Sure.
We don't know how they moved them. I think's the truth.
But also, they show these theoretical barges for moving like a 450-ton obelisk. What wood would they have made the barge out of?
Right.
There are no native trees in Egypt that you can make lumber out of. So automatically people will say, well, the cedars of Lebanon. It's like, I don't think so.
No.
They have to, they always have to give a silly story that they think gullible people will swallow. And all it takes is, medium intelligence to ask a basic question like, what kind of wood? Oh, I don't know.
This is the thing. I'll be provocative. I'll just say it. I don't even think they're trying to make gullible people believe anything. I think that they themselves are the gullible ones because they have not tested these theories. Right. They read about it in some textbook that somebody else made up that didn't do it. These are people that have never been to the gym a day in their life. They don't know the what it takes to lift weight. And I'm not dissing them because they're not muscly or something. I'm saying that when it comes to actually moving mass, it is different than most people think. And it's not just a matter of like, well, hold on a second. If they could do it for this size, then you just add in this many more people. And then because that's what I've heard them say. I've heard these professors say this. So like, it's just a matter of more people. I'm like, that's at a certain level, it doesn't become feasible. Like how large are these ropes? How long are they? And like, I don't know. I just think that a lot of these people, like they mean well, they just they haven't tested it themselves. And I think that's what this comes down to. Like if I had won the Powerball a few weeks ago and it was a bunch of money, like I would have thrown a bunch of money around to get a bunch of these same people to test these things. So like, I'll give you everything you need and I'm going to make you a small fortune in the meantime. We'll all be friends. But let's test this stuff. Let's really examine these things to see if you truly believe now, after having tried it, that these are the methods that would have been utilized. Because there's a lot of debate, obviously. We all know this. There's a ton of debate in this community of ancient history enthusiasts. And I think that we all just want to know the truth. But clearly there's a mystery here.
There is. And I think there's a couple things going on with a lot of this. One is in most cases, they're trying to fit all of the stonework into the box that is this. Here's the evidence of the tools and the things that we found, right? So we found copper chisels, we found pounding stones, we found basic sleds, and we found scenes on the wall that show them carrying, medium or small sized objects on barges. That's the evidence. Like that's, and you go to the museum, there's these little sleds and things there, and they've got the pounding stones. So they then look at everything in Egypt from this lens of, well, here's the tools that we know we found, and they try and and they just use that to cover everything that they see. And there's a real lack in open-mindedness on this. Like there doesn't seem to be any room for the idea. Yeah, exactly. There's a pounding stone right there.
The answer.
That's the tool.
The
wonders of Egypt. That's how they made it, apparently, right? But
that's made 1,000-ton obelisk.
That's how you do it, Jimmy. We filmed a couple people trying their best to make some dust. It was a good video you made, actually. I like that. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say real quick, like those stones are heavier than people realize. Like that's one thing I didn't mention in that little video. When I was holding it, that thing is like 10 pounds. It's not light, and it hurts your hand, and it's not even chipping it away. And some people will say, I saw some criticism or people saying, well, they would have attached them to wood, and make it like hammers. And I'm like, well, let me just say this. That's not what they're telling you in Egypt, because they made us watch that video produced by Zahi Hawass, where they specifically show you. People need to understand this. Like, don't believe me. I'm telling you that they make you, before you visit the Aswan Quarry, go into a classroom and watch a video where they show them hitting it with their bare hands. No wood, and I don't even think it'd make much difference if they were.
No.
But this is what they're teaching. So if you disagree with that method, then cool, we're on the same page. We all agree that there must be a little bit more to that story, because between those cuts, between those the divots, or what I'm trying to say, the scoop marks, thank you, are what, 25, 26 centimeters precisely for each and every single one of them?
Yeah.
Or is it 50 something? So if they're all the same size, that in itself would say that it wasn't done just by hands, people just banging it away. It was something else.
Yeah.
Regardless, I haven't seen these people actually demonstrate these methods with any bit of success. I don't see the round corners. Don't get me going.
No, I know.
Where's my screwdriver? No, Jimmy's wound up now.
There's so much to say about that, all of that, and the quarry's a good example. There's, I can tell you, there's been some studies. So Chris Dunn's book it has a roundup of. There's been several different studies where people have tried. And you get wildly different results, both from older archaeologists and sort of more modern guys that have kind of pounded away and figured out the material removal rates and how long it would take and how much effort it would take. And the results vary wildly. But you've got a number of real significant practical challenges that you can see with your own eyes when you go to Aswan. One is that exactly what you said, Jimmy, is that the scoop marks, and we found this out because we had a couple people on our tour with the latest iPhones that would LiDAR scan things. It turns out that these scoop marks are a very uniform width. They're almost exactly all the same width, which is indicative of a tool that isn't just, all these guys sitting in a trench hammering. Like, you don't have room for starters to use wood down there because these trenches are narrow. Maybe one person fits in them. The other thing is that these scoop marks, not only do they extend horizontally, but they're on underneath the stone. So you're not gravity fine. You can drill a hole maybe this way, but you would also be like doing this up in the air and horizontal, and that's a whole different kettle of fish with this method. It is sort of patently nonsense, and I think that's why they effectively try and indoctrinate everyone that comes through there. Sit down, watch this 20-minute video. It's like, and it's the music. The wonders and Zahis.
It's like an orchestra playing. It's like okay,
and this is how they did it. And go and bang on a stone and just did all. I call it the national project answer. Like, this is a question we asked Zahi back in 2015 on the tours. Like, how did they do it? And his answer to things like how they built the pyramids, how they did these objects, is that it was a national project. Everyone wanted to do it. And this is the orthodox explanation. They just say, people would have felt privileged to go and work as a worker in the granite quarry during the wet season. I'm like, try that for an hour and get back to me. So how you feel after an hour of pounding into granite and like not doing anything with it. It's it's this whole house of cards that's set up, and I mean, the point I was trying to make earlier is that I think that it's a modern phenomena with our orthodox establishment academics. It's this modern phenomena of not being open-minded to answers that are outside of this toolbox that we have from the ancient Egyptians. Like this idea that there may be a tool out. I think. Obviously there were tools out there that did this because we have the results of them. That doesn't mean we found them, and we may never find them, but we have the results of them. You cannot explain what happened, and this is something that Petrie knew, that our older generation of explorers and archaeologists knew. They were aware of it, and they were a bit more open-minded to the mystery, and they would speculate as to how potentially it could have been done, but they were definitely, I think, more aware of and more open to the mystery. But it's modern, last 50 years almost, that we've got this. We know how it was done. It was done with these tools that we've got in the archaeological record, and that's it. And it's like, come on, you can poke holes in that all over the place. Like the sled thing drives me crazy. There's boxes in the Serapeum. They're sitting on the ground. They were in transit. Trust me, if they had just dug under the corner of one and they had found the smallest, tiniest fragment of wood or of some sled that was under that, they would have crowed from the rafters of their ivory towers that the mystery's solved. We figured it out. But they don't do it because there's no evidence of it. I'm sure they used wood to move and sleds, and the dynastic Egyptians did all that. But that doesn't explain the real megalithic stuff.
It's worth mentioning. Brien, I want to hear your opinion, but I just want to throw this out there because you were mentioning, like, this is a human thing where this goes back hundreds of years, whether it's Galileo, Copernicus. I've mentioned this in some of my earliest videos. Like, at one point in time, flat Earth was the scientific consensus. At one point, they would freaking threaten to torture you to death for suggesting that the sun rotates around, the Earth rotates around the sun, or that we weren't the center of the universe. This was the scientific consensus. This is a human thing. We have to embrace the fact that we just don't know everything.
Right.
And it is a human thing to want to be right. And and that's it. Sorry, my dog was, I had to move the camera. He was whimpering. I didn't know if you guys could hear him, so I had to give him some attention. Sorry, Brien, I want to hear your opinion on this.
On what?
Well, on just like whether the like Ben said, like the ivory tower, like this, because you've been doing this for years. You have been presenting these things. You've gone to these sites more than, so there's a lot of people write textbooks on these things. And yet here you are, you've been to Machu Picchu 72, 73 times, I think you had said. You go to Egypt 9, 10 times now. And a lot of these people, and I won't name names, but some of them haven't even been to Egypt once. Many of them actually. And those that have, many of them, it is one time. And so I'm just curious about your opinion. You've seen it all. You've heard people of all explanations. You've heard the academics. You've heard, the alternative, ideas. What's your experience been as far as, what the mindset is on if there's something that you think is totally wrong, and they're clearly wrong in some, like as we've seen in some of these examples, whether it's the stone hammer thing. What do you think that's about? They just don't want to believe something new. They just want to believe that they're right. Are they trying to hide something? Like what's the angle there?
Well, it's a paradigm. It's a boys and girls club, more boys than girls. Mm-hmm. And they all collectively reinforce each other's belief in this collapsing paradigm. And that's what's great about the work what the three of us and others are doing, is that we're physically going to these locations, which is important, because you can only learn so much from photographs in someone else's video. But when you go there, you see the sense of scale, you see the impossibility of it. It doesn't matter how many people you have working on a project like the Great Pyramid. It doesn't matter how many people you have working. It can't be, it simply can't be done. You can't move a block every 2 minutes from the quarry and set it into place and lock everything together. It doesn't work. So I think the important thing is that the paradigm is dying because more and more people's eyes are opening to what is obvious, like the clear distinction between what the dynastic Egyptians could have done with their toolbox and what they couldn't have done, what the Inca could have done, what the Inca couldn't have done, what the Tiwanaku people could have done, what they couldn't have done. You always get that. You get this, everything was done by these people, and you ask simple questions like, how did they do it? And then they give a silly answer like, well, they use bronze chisels and stone hammers and stuff. Anybody with any sense of logic would go, that doesn't work. So that's, that's where, we've all gone through some frustration with this, but it's all working out. Millions of people are now looking at this kind of stuff. It's attracting more and more people to these ancient places, because if you can say that whoever did this work was pre-dynastic or pre-Inca, it makes the time frame bigger and bigger and bigger. So you would think the governments would love this because it would bring in more tourism. Yeah. If you say if this place is 12,000 years old compared to 5, it's like, but that's what we're bringing to the table through our common sense, observation, and videos. It's like, I can't tell you who did it, but I can tell you who didn't.
That's right. Yeah.
I can't tell you what tools they used, but I can tell you what tools they couldn't have used.
That's right.
That's it in a nutshell.
That really is it. Yeah, and that's also a key thing. Like and there's a straw man argument that always goes along with that for people that criticize it. It's like, well, if you don't think that the Inca or that the dynastics did it, then you must think it was draw from this list as aliens or this or that or the other thing, right? And it's like I've never claimed that, and it's on it's a burden of proof discussion, really, and there's a dishonesty that goes with that argument. I'm not claiming, and I don't think any of us are, that we know how it was done, and I am open to all the ideas of where the evidence goes, even and whatever that evidence shows in terms of timelines. Like I've always said that either the dynastic Egyptians, for example, didn't do this work, or And I think that all evidence supports that case and that they most likely inherited it. But the other option is that they did, which means that we've got our understanding of them is completely wrong. Like we have to rewrite the history books either way based on the evidence. I think it's technologically they were far more advanced if they did do it, and they had a vastly different civilization than what we think of it, or they didn't do it, in which case they most likely, in my mind, inherited this stuff, which lends to a longer timeline and previous civilizations and things. And I think there's I think there's far more ancillary evidence now, particularly coming from modern science, that supports that conclusion. Things like the Younger Dryas cataclysm, things like the extension of the human genetic timeline. Like this is, we keep getting older and older. We keep finding, new oldest human remains. We started off at 50,000 years old, then we went to 190,000 years old. Now we're something like 350, 400,000 years old based on the latest find in Morocco. And that's just Homo sapiens sapien. You've also got Denisovans and Floriensis and all these other types of humans that have come up. And Brien, this is a question I want to ask you about it, because I think there's all this evidence for it in South America too, with the elongated skull people. Clearly that's a variety of human that seems to be pretty consistent. It's not us, it's someone else. It's, there's other things going on. I just think there's a tremendous amount of evidence that comes from all these adjacent fields of science that support this case of a longer timeline. Even if the academics don't like to touch it and speculate on it. And a good example's the DNA study that came out. I think it was a Swedish scientist. I forgot his name, but he showed that there's a link between the people in South America and the Australasians, early Australasians. There's a genetic link that only exists between this part in Australasia and then these people in South America. This indicator doesn't exist in the peoples of Central or North America, which is really a challenge for the established story of history, because it means that people that genetic link didn't get there by coming over the land bridge, the whole diaspora of humanity as we know it. It means perhaps there were people crossing the Pacific Ocean way back when, that this is the traces of it that we're seeing now. But typically those guys, they're like, we're just giving you the genetic study, we're giving you the results of the DNA, we're not speculating on what it means for history. So it's, it's those sort of walled gardens of academia, in effect, a little bit.
And to go along with that, haven't they found Mid-Eastern DNA inside Native American DNA of North America? Like that. So that goes right along with it. It's like that in itself throws a bunch of wrenches inside the so-called known human migration process. I'm like, what's Mid-Eastern DNA doing in North American, So think about that.
Yeah, it all points towards this idea that our past is way more complicated than we think it was, right? And that
exactly.
And there's also this, the Y chromosome bottleneck that Antonio Zamora has an excellent video showing, which correlates to the Younger Dryas, saying there was a huge drop in male populations all around the world as a result of the Younger Dryas, because it makes sense, right? That was a megafaunal extinction event. We are a species of megafauna. And it was a cataclysm, the likes of which the planet hadn't seen in probably 5 million years or something. And, we went through it, we survived, and then, this funny story. This seems to also correlate with everything all the ancient cultures say. It even correlates with what our religions say, that the flood myths, the fire myths, all these stories of, our ancestors going through a cataclysm, barely surviving it, having to restart again. That's every single culture almost. It's almost as if this is a way to record information.
Yeah, across 5 continents, they have those legends and hundreds of cultures. And this is mainstream stuff that they have documented. It's like, okay, that's what they say, whether it's true or not. But it's worth mentioning when you say like that 5 million years, I think, so in the last, and this is mainstream science, in the last 450,000 years, there's been 5 interglacial periods. So not ice ages, but periods of the glaciers coming and going.
We're in one now.
Right. So like 5 in the last less than 500,000 years. So I'm like, what's possible in 1 million years? And besides that, what would have happened between each and every single one of those periods? I mean, that's drastic climate change that would have affected humans. I mean, it appears to me that the Earth is a very volatile place. It's rather as hospitable as it is for prolonged periods of time. Then there's these swings of weather, and whether they happen quickly or over prolonged periods of time, this Earth is constantly changing, and that makes civilization probably a difficult thing. And I think it all ties into why there's this lost aspect of our past.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And I mean, look, whether people we can argue all day. I mean, I'm sure people will about climate change. I mean, that's a very political discussion. But the fact is that I really do say that the reason our civilization, and I really believe this, it got to the point that it has, is because of the really lovely weather that we've had for the last 8,000 years or so. Like, honestly, if you go back and all you have to do is go and look at the Greenland and the Antarctic ice core records that show you, like, they basically, it's incredible. And this, again, only happened the last 20 years. This is new information as far as the long story of history goes. But they drill down through the ice, and every year the snow gets laid down and it gets compressed into ice, and from that they've been getting better and better at looking at things like global temperature and the amount of CO2 and other isotopes in there that show us a detailed sort of climate history of the last 400,000 or 500,000 years. And it was a very volatile place, and particularly like the Younger Dryas. This is how all information that's correlated, stuff like that. But since then, we've had a period of calm over the last 8,000 years in terms of the climatic conditions on this planet. Nice, warm, warming slowly. Perfect for life. We haven't had a period like that for the last something like 250,000 years, and that's, I think, one of the major things that's enabled our civilization to flourish. And even through that civilization, we've had little various ups and downs, and people don't realize it, but things like the plagues and the dark ages of all these things, they correlate to cooling events, like to periods of cool. The Renaissance correlates to a warming. We basically, once we came out of the dark ages, I mean, the earth was cooling is one of the reasons that there was famine that encouraged disease. You had all of the plague, bubonic plagues and things happened. And then as we came out of that and started to warm slightly, crops became more plentiful. We flourished. The Renaissance started. Like this, we're very much tied in. Our civilization, our prosperity is tied into the weather on the planet. I mean, and that's where we have it really good. Like there's no real sign of it stopping either, for that matter. But certainly not in comparison to what happened. The actual climate, what I like to call actual climate change, which was what happened 12,500 years ago. Yeah. Anyway,
I have to mix it up a little bit, I have a question for each of you. So whoever wants to go first. One, Ben, this was your 4th, 5th trip to Egypt. So I'm curious, is there something that you learned or something that surprised you on this trip? And then for Brien, for when we go in October, what is it that you're most excited to see? And whoever wants to go first, I'm a bit curious.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. So for me, it was a couple things, actually. So I had some firsts. One was the Bent Pyramid, astonishing place. I mean, I had been looking forward to getting inside there forever, and as you showed in your video, it was opened for the first time in 2019, so that was like a revelation. It's a very confusing place. There's a lot going on in the Bent Pyramid, and since coming back and studying it a little more, like Keith Hamilton's guides, the architecture in that place is phenomenal. Like there's so much going on inside the Bent Pyramid that warrants further study. That I think that represents a real mystery. I don't for a second believe that it was a mistake in terms of the angle change in it. And in fact, people don't know this either. It's actually it's in an earlier interview I did with Yusuf that's somewhere on my channel. But we talk about it because there was a study done to try and confirm this theory. They actually drilled in because the idea was that there was an accident. Like they were building the pyramid and it collapsed. And that's what caused them to change the angle. And if there was a collapse on the internal structure, there'd be some evidence for it. So they went and did some drilling into it around that angle change, and they found no evidence whatsoever of a collapse or of any issues. So it's like they went out and tried to prove their theory of a collapse, and they ended up disproving it. Not something that gets widely publicized in the Orthodox world. But yeah, there was that, and then the other thing that what was the other thing that I came out of Egypt with that I was just blown away by? It was primarily the Bent Pyramid, but I continued to find things around Giza, the Osiris shaft. I mean, that to me was another thing that blew my mind.
Place was creepy,
and just in its I wasn't ever sure exactly where it was on the plateau, and then you see it's right on the causeway between the Khafra Pyramid and the Sphinx. I just think it's like
literally.
It's. I mean, that there is so much more under the ground there. Like this is evident. I think it's direct evidence that there's a connected system of tunneling and chambers that runs beneath the Sphinx, beneath the pyramids, beneath the plateau. I think it's all. It blows my mind that we don't do further work exploring that, or we don't just hammer that place with ground penetrating all of the modern techniques to try and map it out. Because I can tell you from being down in the catacombs in Saqqara and some other places. And it's a video I'm working on right now, in fact, is about Saqqara. there's a lot more going on under the ground at particularly these Old Kingdom sites than we ever thought possible. And I'll stop there and let Brien answer his question.
and real quick, just to throw in there, because you're talking about the bent pyramid, I have a video on it. And to anyone that's interested in learning more about it, go check out NEXT's video. Apparently he has a 2-hour video on that, and I can't wait to see it. And just came out. So people should check that out, because he was in there about a year before I was even in there when it first opened up. So I bet there's a ton of info in that video that would be outstanding. So props to NEXT.
Yeah, he does good work, and if I've started watching that video. I haven't finished it, but yeah, it looks he's done a lot of research on it. Looks great.
Yeah.
So Brien, what do you want to? We're going to October. What's number one on that list, or number two maybe perhaps as well?
Well, the great thing about Egypt is that as time goes on, rather than other countries that are closing the mysterious aspects of these places off with ropes and stuff, Egypt's actually opening stuff up.
Yeah.
So the Osiris Shaft has only been open for like 4 years, maybe, to the general public, and going underneath the step pyramid at Saqqara, that's only been open for like a year or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, I focus, obviously, my focus is on pre-dynastic evidence. So I find the dynastic works very, very beautiful. I find ancient Egyptian spirituality very, very nice. But they don't intrigue me the way that the enigmatic, massive scale stuff does, such as the Serapeum, of course, which has, I don't know if you guys had the side door, metal door open, because it's much bigger. It's bigger than what most people realize it is.
Yeah.
Some people think that there's a whole series of tunnels that keep going.
Mm-hmm.
The Osiris Shaft is absolutely mind-boggling. Tanis is surreal. Going into the pyramids themselves are great. I can't wait to see the box that you guys recently filmed that had the really incredibly precise corners.
Lahun.
That's the stuff that's still, that's why I keep going back to Egypt, is because I can't get enough visits to these enigmatic places that conventional academics basically don't even look at. They don't try to explain them. They don't try to explain how the boxes of the Serapeum got in there without there being any kind of soot on the ceiling or, whatever, that kind of stuff, and how they were put down into the niches. You can see the obvious sign where the one is still in the hallway. So you have the box, then you have the lid. They're both unfinished. So somehow the box was supposed to go into the niche. Then the lid comes along, gets put on top, gets marked, in order to finish, gets taken off, finally tuned, and then the lid goes on and hermetically seals the vessel. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. You just reminded me. I would add Lahun Pyramid, and particularly that box, to my revelations from that last trip, because I'd heard about it. I'd just heard about they've opened up this Lahun Pyramid. It's really cool. I'm like, It's like, because it's one of those middle, they say mud brick pyramid. It's not. It's I would consider to be an Egyptian attempt at copying some of the older stuff, but again, it's another case of something that's. I think dynastic and low-tech, built on top of a subterranean structure and objects that are obviously very high-tech. And I think this happened a lot, with a lot of nuance at these places where the dynastic Egyptians used these sites, and then they respected, they built on top of them. I think that's what's going on at Lahun, because that box is insane. It's not the biggest one you've ever seen, but it's actually inside a granite room. Like, the whole room is so precisely made. It's an arched ceiling. The only other arched ceiling I've seen like that's the one inside the third pyramid. And I think that one's made from limestone. But this one's a granite room with granite arched pieces, beautifully made. And then, this box that's, thousandths of an inch in terms of perfect. And it's Petrie, when I went and dug up information on it after, Petrie measured it, and he just called it, perhaps the finest piece of work ever executed in such a tough and unforgiving medium. Like, he thought it was the finest piece of precision sculpture that had ever been done. And as far as I know, it is certainly ancient. It's sort of we can maybe attain those levels, or we can, I'm sure, attain those levels of precision now with our CNC machine guided tools. But trying to suggest to some guy going, lining up his thumb at the. That looks pretty flat and straight to me. Yeah, pounding stones, exactly. Yeah,
the bronze chisel. That thing was. That thing's evidence that they had more than what they claimed. I didn't even know it existed until you told me about it. When we're on the way there, you're like, "Hey, you're telling me exactly what Petrie had said. It might be the most precise, box ever made, or stonework." And then when you're there seeing it, and people had their laser pointers and they're like doing it from one end to the other, and this thing was perfection.
Yeah.
And then it had like that slant at the bottom, like to go along with the room.
Odd.
I'm like, what's?
Well, no. So the room is level. Like I had to figure this out. The room is level. The box appears to be slant. Like it's a tricky thing to really see in there because the perspective is a little wonky just looking at it. But the room's level. The box is tilted. So the top of it looks like it's is tilted, but the actual insides are straight. Like the whole thing sort of slanted over a bit, and it must have been functional. There must have been a reason that they did this. It took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on, but you can get it. You can pick it up from Petrie's measurements. But there was some reason that they made it that way. It's so precise and in terms of its relative dimensions at each corner and each shape. Like they did that deliberately. This wasn't a mistake, and I just have no idea why.
Without a doubt.
There has to be a reason for it. And then, Brian, you mentioned the other thing about the Serapeum was the side door. Not on this trip, so there's a funny story attached to it too. So for people that don't know, I do have videos on my channel of going in there in the Serapeum series. Next to like this big rose granite box, there's a big green set of doors that leads to a. It's not finished. It's not finished being renovated or whatever they're doing. But in previous trips there, I've been in there, and it has inside all these other alcoves, and there's you see one of the big granite steles that was inside all of the alcoves that's busted up in one area. But it also has my favorite box in the whole place, which is this massive, one of the biggest ones in there, big black granite box that's tucked away in a corner in this unfinished area. And I show that box on my channel, got some videos of it. And so we wanted to get in there, and we would have, had not the almost entire Saqqara staff been sort of dismissed and sort of put in the sin bin, for want of a better term, because of so apparently at the same time we were in Egypt, there was some woman had rolled up, and she was running around taking these what can I say, Instagram style risque sort of photos at the sites, like dressing up like some sort of, forgive the term, but it's some sort of slutty pharaoh queen. Like it's just big provocative, busty girl that was taking these pictures. And then of course Egypt's fairly conservative, right? This is not a good thing to be doing in a Muslim country like that. And anyway, and also fairly disrespectful to the culture, honestly. And she did this, and she did it at one site, and then there's a picture, and then she also did it at Saqqara, and then the government figured it out. And they basically shit-canned the entire staff because of it. And, of course, that included our connection that had the keys to the door. The guys on site didn't even have the keys to the padlock to open that door. But otherwise, we would have got in there. But I did... I did hit...
sorry, go ahead. I'll tell the story after.
Yeah, one last thing about the Serapeum is that I did hear a very interesting rumor from some people that work on that site and around Saqqara in general, that they may have discovered a whole other extension to that place, and there might be as many as 20 more boxes in another set of galleries. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. That guy
working there said. That's worth mentioning. A person that works there every day. That's what he said, right? Like that's what my understanding was. That's worth mentioning. Like it's a rumor. We know something.
Yeah,
or is it just a rumor?
Well, I would class it as an unverified rumor at this point, but it was, it's certainly something that I'm going to try and look into a little more, and we'll see. I think there's I agree with what Brian said about Egypt opening up more, and I think that's because there's been a change of the regime in the antiquities department, and the new guy seems pretty keen about doing this, and you can tell like they're making discoveries, and so it's every month or two you'll see something in the news. Oh, they found this, and I think it's all trying to build up to the opening of the new Grand Museum. So it's possible that they've made this discovery and they're sitting on it, and that they're going to wait to get that so it has maximum impact on the world stage. Because when they finally do open up that Grand Museum, they want dignitaries and kings and queens and all this sort of nonsense. So they're going to try and build up. I'm sure it's a coordinated strategy. I'd like to think that sort of stuff will see the light of day. Obviously, I'd like to know the answer now if they found more boxes like that, particularly if they're sealed, and then. But who knows? I think there's if it has happened, I think there's a chance we'd see that closer to the opening of the Great Pyramid if they've discovered something.
Well, if if they simply let us know, the three of us could plug it on our channels.
Well, actually, if you notice when you walk down the steps to get into the Serapeum, at the top on the left-hand side, I was able to get into that. It's always been taboo. I was able to get into that area. Somebody has sealed off like a big series of chambers or rooms there in relatively recent times. So I think that's the location of the extension of the Serapeum. It keeps going off in that direction. But that's
interesting.
That's also even archaeologists will say that only about 15% of ancient Egypt has been unraveled or unearthed or whatever you want to say. But most people will then say, well, the other 85% is under the sand, but they don't understand the other 85% is underground. It was built on purpose underground. And that's why you also hear the stories like from Abdel Hakim Aouyan of a tunnel connecting Saqqara with the Giza Plateau because he went through it when he was a kid and all this kind of stuff. So, there's a lot more that we could explore as time goes on, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's a crazy
story. Because didn't he say that he had walked, it was like 8 miles, like as the bird flies, right? After line of sight, like 8 miles. And people need to realize Yusuf Salyan's father did that as a kid. Like, he's not making that up. Like, people can think what they want, but I believe it. Why would he lie about something like that? I totally believe it. And we already know that there's all this infrastructure under the plateau as it is. We'll be discussing this in our videos with all those shafts that you see along the plateau, and you see that there's tunnels that go horizontal through them. I got some great pictures. People can see and think for themselves, and some of them are gated off. And it's like, there's things there. I don't know what's there. I hope my dog is whimpering. I'm going to have to feed him in a second. Don't worry, we're not getting off. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Can you hear him? He's like, he thinks there's something wrong with me because I'm talking alone. He's not. If I could be on the phone walking around, he doesn't do anything. But when I do a FaceTime, he thinks there's something wrong with me.
Oh yeah,
German Shepherds are the best. They look after you.
Just wants to participate. Yeah, I know. I've got my door shut because my dog's out there too. So.
Something I want to mention real quick, going back to with that lady who was taking provocative photos. A lot of people were asking, like, hey, did you get a chance to hike the pyramid? Did you go to the top of the Great Pyramid? And a lot of people don't understand just how tightly the security is. There was guards everywhere. And when we were there in the Great Pyramid, we went at night. And there was guards everywhere. And apparently the story, and I think, Ben, you're the one that had told me this, or someone told me, that some couple went up there.
Oh, yeah.
They snuck up to the top and they filmed a porno up there. Like, they banged and filmed it and put it on the internet. And that's apparently is the reason why the Egyptian government doubled up their security. And they hired a third party security company to lock that place down. Like, you can't even get on the steps. Like, I climbed up one set of steps just to get a picture, and they're blowing their whistles at me, yelling at me. Like, they're not messing around. Like, no one's allowed on that thing. And apparently that was the reason why, or one of the reasons.
Yeah, you'll find that out, Brian, too. It's one thing that I've noticed that they did do is they've added a rope barrier around the Great Pyramid. They kind of you can, if you're rolling with Yusuf or whatever, hop over and be around. They'll tweet the whistle at you, but and all the locals are kind of ignoring it and running. Kids are on the first couple courses of the pyramid a lot, but they have added a barrier, and I'm sure when tourism gets back in full swing, those guards love telling people what not to do. So. It's kind of a little. I'm like, nah, that's one of those things you can't quite get right up onto the first course of it, and that wasn't there a year or so ago. So but whatever. That's the way it goes. Same thing as those blasted blue ropes at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, right? They keep adding more of those things. So.
Yeah, they said it was temporary, and it's not temporary.
No, these things never are.
If you pay the lady who runs the little kiosk thing, who takes the tickets, if you go there first thing in the morning and give her a tip, she'll let you go in there until other tourists show up.
Nice.
So, nice.
It's always
that's good to know.
It's always local influence.
Yes.
And timing is always the important thing. So that's why we go to Pumapunku first, then we go to Tiwanaku, because almost nobody goes to Pumapunku. They all go to Tiwanaku and then go home.
Yeah.
So all subtle stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, that's one place, man. I am still working on a video. I still have Poznansky's volumes here. I have managed to find myself his 2 volumes, and that's a video that's been ongoing for almost a year in terms of writing and researching for it. That I will be doing a big thing on at some point, but there's a lot more to discover, I think, and talk about when it comes to Puma Punku and Tiwanaku. Like Jimmy, you can't wait because you haven't seen those either, right? I can't wait to we all go together
Only
and you see those places, because that's really like nothing else on the planet. I mean, it's hard to overstate how enigmatic Puma Punku, and it's all one site, but they call it two separate things. Yeah. But
and it was found buried, correct? Like I think Brian, I was watching one of your videos, wasn't it? It's all under dirt, like 16. I don't remember how much, but like, and it was all found wrecked, and they pieced it back together of what they thought it should look like, and it's not at all what was actually, who knows? No. It's in the mud.
Yeah, they've done a nice job restoring parts of it, but you have to also understand a lot of what you're looking at is a modern restoration. But there's tons of just a lot of the interest comes from the blocks that haven't been restored, like the stuff that's just sticking out of a wall somewhere where they've been like, clearing, and then you find these perfectly shaped, pieces of andesite that are most intricately carved, and it's just we haven't bothered to excavate this all the way. This is just like all the other stuff that we see out here, and it's just one piece of it's kind of mind blowing in complexity. You want to talk about it just like teasing and blowing, like knocking away the idea of using hand tools and sort of primitive tools to make stuff. It's like they were just toying with it. Like there's no rhyme or reason for the amount of interior 90-degree trilinear corners that are at that place, and it's just like, we just did this because we could. It was, it's such a strange place, and there's so much detail in a lot of the stonework there that's just, don't know how they did it.
We got to see it. We got to go there this year. I got to see it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Got to get
part
the
of
shot.
The world too. Got to get the shot, mate. Yeah, we certainly heard that a lot. Yeah, it's good. I look forward to it. Yeah, so with Puma Punku, I think one thing that I'm working on that's very interesting about that site is specifically how it's dated as well. This is another anomaly in history. There is the orthodox dating. What do they say this was built, Brian? It was like fairly recently, like 1100 AD. That's what they say.
Between 100 AD and 1100
Okay,
AD.
so in that period, but. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that there's a nuance of layers of cultures that may have used that site. But I'm digging into what Poznański's dating of it based on the same technique that kind of gets used in Giza and elsewhere, which is astronomical dating based on alignments to particular constellations, and an understanding of the great year, the 26,000, 27,000 year precession of the equinoxes, and the way that site was originally laid out as Poznański found it led him to speculate that it may be as old as 12 to 15,000 years old, and that it aligned specifically to constellations based on that great year. And he gets a lot of criticism for that idea. He's not around to defend himself from it anymore. But very few people have I think really read what he wrote. And one of the things that he said was that he was very open-minded to other interpretations, and he acknowledged that this was only at the early stages of the science that would be required to accurately date this site, and that he hoped that going forward, future generations would continue to refine and enhance this science of trying to use alignments and figure out how things were set up. Because one of the problems with that, though, these days is that in the modern reconstruction of that site in Tiwanaku specifically, is that they've moved things around. So you don't actually have the same alignment targets. They've reconstructed it and shifted stuff from the original plan. So that's why I think it's important to go back and look at the original records. And of course, Arthur Poznański spent 50 years excavating that site. He's pretty much, his books and his material contain all of the original as found kind of ground plans for that site. Yeah, interesting place.
Well, also what a lot of people don't know, because I've been there, I've been to Puma Punku and Tiwanaku between 50 and 60 times, and I have the privilege of going with Antonio Portugal, who will join us if you guys come on the August tour. He spent like 40 years with archaeologists studying the site. They were able to do ground-penetrating radar, and they found massive hollow chambers underneath Puma Punku that have never been allowed to be excavated. So that's ground-penetrating radar of the site. And recently, they did LiDAR from a quadcopter, I think, and they found out that what's underground is much, much bigger than what's above ground. So now the government has to not necessarily excavate, but they have to come up and tell the truth that Pumapunku and Tiwanaku are much bigger than what they suggest.
Right.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's scientific evidence that shows that it is. There's things under there. It hasn't been excavated. So proof that there's more to it.
You know what? It even matches with some of the indigenous sort of rumors and things that go around that site. I mean, Rosemarie, I think I put you in touch with her. She's got a place. She's sort of descendant from the peoples of that area, and she would tell you about tales of where they said there were stairs leading down, and there were evidences of these underground chambers in the Inti Paka underneath the pyramid there, and that's since all been covered up. Like there's actually stories from people of that there were these staircases and things that led down into the underground there, which I would believe that as well. Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount more work that could happen in that area. I mean, it's funny too. It's as I think you've pointed out, I've seen on your channel, like it's a big site. There's all big boundary around it, but by no means does that encapsulate the entire scope of scale of what's there. You've got farmers' fields on either end of this thing that have these blocks in them that are clearly the same origin. These andesite-shaped blocks. You know, that place was probably far larger back in the day.
Well, and also not to mention the little village of Tiwanaku, where the foundations of the houses are made from stones from Pumapunku and Tiwanaku.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the church which is there, which is about 10 times the size of what it should be for a town of that size. Local people say that's the epicenter of Pumapunku, is what's underneath the church.
Yeah.
So, an extension of it going that way.
Shocker.
Wow.
The human nature aspect of reclaiming, renovating, and reusing raises its head once again. It's you got the Parthenon in Rome, you've got the Coricancha in Cusco, you've got the church at Tiwanaku. Yeah, I mean, it's funny.
In Cairo, and then you got Cairo.
Right. Yeah. Well,
God, yeah.
I mean, mosques and stuff built from the stones, from the pyramids. Half the town. Like, same thing in Cusco, even like Spanish villas, when the colonial, like that, they quarried the heck out of Sacsayhuaman to build them. The churches in Cusco are fascinating. You can just see the different, like where they've taken megalithic blocks and tried to plaster them together, and then they've had to use local stone. These buildings just have so many different styles of architecture, which is one of the reasons I find it so fascinating.
Well, another point with that is that when you and I and Ildi and the others were filming at San Cristobal, the church, which is up on the hill below Sacsayhuaman. I would walk past that every day because that's how you get to Cusco from where we were living. And there was a gate that was always locked, and it said bathroom. So that's very curious. One day I was walking by, and there was a guy in there cleaning the bathrooms. So he let me go inside, and he said, "There's a tunnel, or there's a shaft that goes straight down, connecting with a tunnel system." So that's local information. And he said, I clean all of the toilets in all the ancient churches in Cusco, and each one has a shaft that goes down and connects with a tunnel. So there you go.
Yeah.
If there's one thing, and I know because there's so much debate inside the community of lost ancient history enthusiasts, whether it's the technology aspect and the ages and the dating and all that, but if there's one thing that I wish that would unite, whether it's the mainstream scholars and versus the alternative people that could unite everyone, is that there are things that none of us are aware of that are worthy of exploration. And if there's one thing everyone could agree about, is that none of us have all the information. Right. And we are, I believe, entitled to it. This is humanity. This stuff existed long before anyone was alive. And I don't know, it'd be nice to see if at least something that could bring everyone together would be like, hey, where do these tunnels go? If it goes nowhere, okay. But I want to see a picture and video of it going nowhere. Show me kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree. And speaking of tunnels that go nowhere, there was we just had a quick break and we were discussing one. There's and this is, I think, an opportunity that you guys are going to have on your upcoming Egypt trip, which is going and looking at the tunnel that supposedly goes nowhere at the back end of the Sphinx, which is only accessible with the special permission to go down and stand, in the Sphinx enclosure. This is an aspect of visiting Egypt that is worth understanding, is that there's a lot you can see and do on your own as a tourist, but going with a group, and this was the focus of our trip in December, was, we had 5 or 6 special permissions on them. And that's one of the benefits of going in a group, is that there are certain things that you can only do with a special permission that, it costs several thousands. Each of them costs several $1,000s, which is why you have a group to help everyone have the experience and share the cost. Things like, getting into all the chambers of the Great Pyramid, renting that thing effectively for 2 hours, getting into the Sphinx enclosure, getting into the Assyrian, which we did on our recent trip. But yeah, you guys have got the chance to get down in between the paws. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, another, there are just so many subtle things. That's why we're going to have to keep doing these podcasts, because there's so much stuff we can discuss
all day.
But another simple thing about the Sphinx is that they're in between the paws of the Sphinx. There are a series of planks, like in a grid system, that are there. And Mohammed Ibrahim was our guide that day. And I said, why did they put this here? Because you have a stone staircase coming down, then you have sand and, stuff. And he said, they built that series of wooden planks to hide the access to the underground system under the Sphinx. And what would happen is, in the late 90s, at 1 o'clock in the morning, heavy equipment would go up there. They'd lift up the planks and they would start doing excavation. And this is from the Awian family. Then they'd say, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, all the lights of the machines would be turned off. They'd go back down and leave the complex. So again, it's the local information which is the most profound, because that's local people seeing stuff in their neighborhood. Yeah. And that's where you get these insights that there's much, much more, especially to the underground system in Egypt, than what almost anybody wants to fess up to.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a similar story, like that place has been, at some point there was a concert that they tried to do. Occasionally they do these things. This might have been a couple decades ago, and they basically erected a stage and a tent or like a covering over the front of that area between the paws of the Sphinx. And for a couple of weeks, this is a one-night concert, but for a couple of weeks, apparently there were dump trucks going back and forth and all this stuff happening beneath the cover of this stage. And after that period was when they ended up putting that wooden floor down, because people don't realize there is a paving stone. Like, the Sphinx is shaped from bedrock, but that area between its paws and the front of it, there's actually, people call it these Roman paving stones. There's definitely a paving stone system on the ground there. And yeah, for sure, there could be that means that could be on top of something. There could be, openings there. And, these are, as you say, the A1 family and those guys, they literally live across the road from it, sit there staring. Yusuf's balcony, you sit there staring at the Sphinx and the pyramids. You can watch it 24/7. So I'm sure there that the locals see that sort of activity. And that doesn't surprise me in the least. When it gets to like all the speculation and things that have happened, in the other entrances into the Sphinx body. There's obviously one at the rear end that has a little wooden grate across it, that's supposedly goes nowhere, according to Mark Lehner. But Brian, you were saying, like, he did spend a couple of weeks determining that it went nowhere.
Yeah, and there is, if you stick your head in there, there is a metal ladder that goes down. Yeah. So where does the ladder go to?
Well, and there's a tunnel.
And does that connect up with the Osiris shaft tunnel system? Mm-hmm. That's what's great about keeping going back, is first time you go, you want to look at all the big stuff. Then second, third, fourth, you start to pick up all the subtleties of stuff and objects you hadn't seen before. And so it's getting into the subtleties and connecting the dots as you go. And that's why I'm very excited to be going in October with Jimmy, because we were going to go in March, but like next month. But the world is too chaotic at the moment to do stuff like that. But I think everything will settle down, and it'll be fine to do these explorations as well. If you guys want to come in August to Peru and Bolivia too, then the tour is already set up. It's on the website. The whole itinerary's there. Everything. So that would be very exciting to be with the two of you in the field.
That's the idea.
I'm used to working with with old guys, older guys than me. But having younger guys with fresh eyeballs
we'll bring the
would be
party
really
with
good
us.
for me.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. Stay tuned. Hopefully in the next week or so, we can figure out those details and announce it on our channels and media and all that sort of stuff. Because I know for me, I have a lot of people asking like, when are you going to get down to South America again, and when's that going to happen? So hopefully we'll have something to say about that in a week or so.
And a lot of people, because I mean, as we know, times are crazy. So Ben, we traveled in November, December of 2020, which, I mean, people were asking me like, what are you doing? Like, what? Like, I'm crazy. I'm like, get busy living or get busy dying. I'm like, I can't stay cooped up for the rest of my life, and I won't be held down by fear. And everyone has a right to choose what they want to do with their lives. And what was interesting about our group that we went with, which I also believe will be the same exact case for later this year, is that there's a certain type of person that's willing to travel under these worldly circumstances. And it was good vibes. We had a fantastic tour. Yeah. There's people I'll be in touch with for the rest of my life. And that's what I'm saying. Like, so our tour was great. And Brien, like, when we go, it's going to be the same thing. People that are willing to take a risk, because there is risk. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, like there's so many unknowns in the future as far as travel restrictions or whatever. But I am optimistic, and hey, where there's a will, there's a way. And like I said, get busy living and get busy dying. Like this is a profound opportunity to see these sites while they're virtually empty, which is what we had the privilege of doing when we went. And I'm convinced it's going to be the same thing over the next several months, that many, many places are not going to be, people are not going to be traveling like they once were, at least not anytime soon. So now it's still a profound opportunity to go and see these sites like never before.
Yeah, and that's where offering a bit of baksheesh, which is a bribe, has the opportunity of doors opening that nobody else has access to, because
that's right.
Egypt's going through a very tough time, and so there's an incentive for it. There's always a person who, that's what Abdel Hakim Al-Rian would say. He'd say, let's find whoever has the keys, and that's how he would get access to places that nobody had access to. It's a little bit of baksheesh, and you get 5 minutes to go down the staircase and come back out or whatever, but that's how it works.
That is how it works. Yeah, grease the skids, cross the palms, things can happen. Like that's the joy of and again, these tours using guys, why it's so much value, guys like Yusuf and Muhammad and all the people that typically that you would use on a tour like that and travel with, know how that system works, and you can for a little bit of baksheesh, you can make things happen, which is good. And it's, always you want to be respectful. I mean, I understand they close off access. They're trying to preserve sites. When you do it respectfully. And I'm never going to hurt anything. I'm always just going there. I'm interested in looking. I'm not interested in defacing or doing anything silly. So, it's I think it's all in the spirit of the right cause. And as you said, Jimmy, I think we all have a right to understand some of this, our shared history, our shared past, because I think a lot of this stuff, this is some of the few places where we really have this evidence for it there. Unfortunately, there's only a few places around the world where we have these remnants, and that's why they're so profound and they're so special. And I think they feel so emotional when you visit. Right? There's a weird left brain, right brain connection. I think the first time I went to Egypt, I was expecting to have this analytical approach to it, and I was going to go and just try and understand it from this technological perspective. But you can't help but feel it when you go there, right? There's an emotional feeling. There's an attachment, like you, it has this profound nature that I wasn't expecting, but it hits you the first time you really see the pyramids. You go and stand in front of them and look at them. It's unavoidable, and I know guys like Kristan have had the same experience, where it's just like, wow, there's this connection to it. There's a profound nature to it, and we all have the right to experience some of that. So, yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Well said. I felt it too. It was like, and people I don't care what they think. I almost wonder if it's like a DNA memory type thing, which DNA memory does exist. They've proven this in dogs and other animals. I almost wonder, I mean, it's something, it's like, I knew it felt good. And in certain places there did not feel good, actually. I'll say that, and I wasn't expecting it, but the Cairo Museum, the Valley of the Kings, and the Osiris Shaft all gave me terrible vibes. And I know that sounds silly. Some people just like, oh, whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, well, Valley of the Kings, that's a tomb, and Osiris Shaft is a tomb, and like, so of course it's weird. And I'm like, it's just in your head, but like, I wasn't thinking that when I went in there. But those two places aside, the Cairo Museum, many people said that they had a weird feeling in there. And Yusuf said it's because it's the congregation of all these different types of things that have each individually have all these different energies to them. And again, some people can just woo that off. But for me, I'm like, I felt something in there. I felt drained and exhausted in a different way. And it was, I don't know, maybe it's because he had dead people, mummies, right there on display. And maybe there's something off about that. But I don't know. I felt it before I saw those mummies. But there's something weird about these places, but it's worth experiencing. And I'm going back to all three of those places. I'm going back in that Osiris shaft.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, and Yusuf does talk about like you don't have those pyramids don't feel like tombs when you're there. It's a different feeling. I mean, no. And the museum is a bit like, I'd liken it to I'd feel about the same I would as if I'd spent about 30 minutes in a modern shopping mall. Like that just drains the energy right out of me. I definitely felt that after a few hours in the Egyptian Museum. There's definitely an energy to it. Well, I'm that guy that's like dragging along. I don't want to go shopping.
It's
just
time to go.
Walking along behind the wife, like I'm not interested in this. But yeah, the museum is fascinating, but you can definitely, there's a different energy. It's funny, Yusuf was saying, like you could spend all day walking around Giza and feel energized by it and just not tired, but then, in some of these other spots, it's like the energy just gets drained right out of you. And it's just how you feel. Like it's a seat of the pants feeling you can only experience when you're there. And it's hard to quantify and define and specifically say why, but undeniably true.
Because I felt good in those pyramids. I felt really good. I felt I felt good there. The Assyrian, all these other places, or especially Dendera, the Dendera complex, Temple of Hathor. Like I felt good in there. In Temple of Seti, like I was like, these places are magnificent. But it's not just the visual feeling good. Like I'm all inspired by the massive columns. It's something else about it, and people need to experience it. And I've heard it from others, but I experienced it myself while it was not on top of my head. It wasn't like a placebo thing where it's like, okay, I heard you're going to feel weird in here, because that's not what I heard at all. I was there, and I just noticed on my own that I felt differently in different places. Brien, did you experience that when you were visiting these sites? Better at some versus others?
Yeah, well, I would say more intrigued. Yeah, more intrigued with some than others. Like the dynastic stuff, I enjoy. I see the wonderful craftsmanship that was involved, the capability of the dynastic Egyptians to be able to do that kind of stuff. But I don't find them mysterious, because I can see, okay, so they made this column out of a number of blocks, each about 3 feet high. If you have 6 people, they could lift it up or whatever and do that. But it's the enigmatic nature of the pre-dynastic megalithic stuff. I remember also, I think only twice so far, when we went to Karnak, they had all of Karnak was suddenly open, because before that, big areas were sealed off. And I walked through this one section. There are these giant quartzite seated statues with huge, arms blown off, and half the face is missing and stuff, and that looks like cataclysmic destruction to me, not an invading army. So that it's seeing stuff like that just it's a left brain, right brain thing where the two can meld together and analyze together. So this is I'm getting very excited to go back now. I was to go next month, and I kind of thought, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. But now I'm getting excited to go back. And pretty soon I'll be able to, as they say, smell the camels. And that's a sign before you go.
Yep.
Know you're going.
Yeah, you'll all experience that when you get over there, that's for sure. Yes, and I was going to say, in terms of giant, the megalithic sites that inspire wonder, and maybe we can make this our last topic here, but you briefly mentioned it, Jimmy, but the Assyrian, which is this tremendous megalithic structure that's off to the side of the Temple of Seti, the first, I think, and we had the chance on our trip to go down. It's another special permission to go down into the Assyrian. But if you want a place that sort of inspires wonder and just mystery and has that feeling, the Assyrian is just that place. It's a trip. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, it's something about that place. I mean, going down in there and these 70, 80-ton single pieces of granite that have sort of interlocked together. It's very similar to the Valley Temple at Giza, but almost larger in some ways. No real markings, no glyphs. There's some work that was done on the limestone at the end. You've got that place. I assume you're going back down into there on your trip in October too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's
good.
Definitely worth it.
That place is unreal. And thank goodness for those that couple that were doing the 3D mapping of everything. They got the precise measurements. Because I've always heard like, it could be this weight, it's approximately these huge pillars or stone blocks are this tall, and we got the exact amounts, and like or the precise details of it. And I mean, it's when you're standing in there, like I said, like when you know you're in the presence of greatness, like this place was unreal. It was insane. And the layout of itself is I don't know what to make of it.
The little alcoves everywhere around the
Yeah.
edges. Yeah, very strange. In fact, I saw on Twitter recently some pictures from black and white sort of turn of the century pictures that there was a much lower water level, because today the water level, this green connection, and a lot of people don't realize that the Assyrian continues down quite a way, like 30 plus feet down, like 11 meters is the figure that I've heard, which is like 35 feet or thereabouts. And I've seen some pictures recently of the Assyrian with a lot of that water drained out and looking down. So those blocks continue down into the ground. And one of the reasons that there is water there is that there's also a tunnel down there that they've never fully explored, but apparently it connects to the water table. That's why there's water in there now. And they just don't spend any money trying to drain it out. They have a problem draining it out because it keeps coming in through this tunnel that's connected down the bottom, which is funnily enough, also a thing you have on many of these other sites, which is, the presence of groundwater and tunnels that go down into it. Like same thing, a Cyrus shaft, bottom levels full of water with tunnels going off on the sides that nobody's really explored. Hawara, where the labyrinth is, you go down, there's tunnels that lead down into the water with shafts that, Petrie explored back in the day, but God only knows what's under the ground at Hawara. Like you said, Brian, we should definitely do more of these because there's no end of things to talk about.
It's endless.
But yeah, the Assyrian was one of my absolute favorite sites, and that was a place that I was looking forward to getting into to see. And yeah, you mentioned Johanna James earlier in the break, Jimmy, and she was on our trip with us. She's been producing amazing content. She did a great video on the Assyrian. That's one of the ones that I'm working on too, because I had the chance to film there as well on that same trip. And really looking forward to digging into that place and putting some more content out about it, because it's fascinating, and it goes further than people think too. There's a long tunnel alcove system at the end that's like 100 meters almost long that you can walk up. That is covered in hieroglyphs. It's plastered and then covered in hieroglyphs. But that I don't think anyone that looks at that place, you can't say it's the same thing as the Temple of Seti I. It's almost as if they, while making that temple, discovered that the Assyrian was here in the ground, and they turned their whole temple just a little bit to the right, so they could go next to it, instead of over it.
Sure.
It's at a whole different different level than the rest of the dynastic temple.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well. Guys,
right on.
This was awesome. I want to thank both of you.
It was great.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we did it, and we need to do it again. And we all need to go to Peru together, and we need to make Egypt happen. And when we stop recording, I have an idea about Egypt. I won't say it on. People are going to get mad at me because like, stop recording. You're going to say something off of it. But like, just an idea. All I know is that anyone that's listening to this that has a desire to go to Egypt, you can make it happen. You can go there or Peru this year. You have plenty of time that in the event of worldly issues involving whether it's getting a vaccine that you don't want or whether it's travel restrictions, you have plenty of time to back out of it and not lose a single thing. So if you have this itching to go, because I saw this on our trip, I saw so many comments afterwards like, I was going to go, I wish I had, and I didn't. I was too nervous. Guys, like I'm telling you, get busy living, get off that couch, go. You won't regret it. And there's something very liberating about going when there's risk, when there's all these other people that are staying home. There's something special about it. It makes it quite exciting. And it's like, it reminds you just how alive you really are. And then when you get out to see the sites that people have wanted to see their entire lives, like I would just encourage anyone to do it. Do your research. There's always risk for anything, but without risk, there's no reward. And it makes life so much more fun, I think. So anyone watching this that wants to go, you can go, you can make it happen.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Go with you guys on that trip. I'm also planning a trip to Egypt. It may be shortly after I'm looking at the end of this year as well. I haven't announced or figured out the specific details for mine yet. But yeah, go anyone, like go with you guys. Go. I would same thing. I would encourage people to go because it's also a rare opportunity, even though it's, you might perceive some risk. Certainly, I'm not sure the rest of the world is always on board with the same level of risk and how we're perceiving it. But you go because there's a unique opportunity that's presented at the moment with these sites, and that's the fact that they're relatively empty of tourists, which really hasn't been the case for the last 40 years in places like Egypt. There's been tremendous, seas of people at these places, and certainly in December when we were there, we had many of them to ourselves, and I suspect that's going to continue. I'm sure the numbers will slowly increase this year, but I don't think it's going to take some time to get back to the full, like there's 50 or 60 tour buses at this location. It was incredible. We'd pull up to these parking lots that you could see were designed to take 70, 100 tour buses, and we're the only one there. And
literally the only one.
So now's the time this year I think is the time to try and grab that opportunity, even if it does come with some additional difficulties in trying to arrange travel. It can be done. My sympathies are with everyone in Australia and the people that have issues with quarantines and lockdowns, and I know that the UK has that as well. So hopefully, as we said, that'll slow down this year, and some of these things will open up, and more people have more opportunity to get back out there. Because it's I can tell you from my personal experience in 2020, man, I was in Australia in February, early on before this started, just got out before it really kicked off, came back to the States, didn't go anywhere until the trip in November, December to Egypt, and I was ecstatic to get out and to do some traveling, and it felt amazing. I think that's a lot of people are missing that feeling at the moment. So hopefully you can hopefully this next year will bring a bit more freedom on that respect for a lot of people. So
yeah,
I hope so.
All right. Well, yeah, awesome, guys. So thanks again. Thank you, both of you. Great speaking
Wonderful
with you, and we will definitely do it again.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
Brian, pleasure to make your acquaintance finally. I'll see you in Egypt, brother.
Yep, my honor. Always great to speak to you, Ben.
Yeah, you
Sawyer.
too. Yeah, and
Sawyer's telling me it's time to get off.
yeah, indeed. And stay posted, everyone. We'll probably have an announcement coming out pretty soon about South America this year too. So.
You bet. We're going to make it happen.
Thanks, guys.
Come here, Sawyer. Sawyer says hi, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Okay, thank you.